So hello everybody. We let people getting in. We give a few minutes so that people enter the room, the space. So we are already 26 people. Okay. So I think, Chet, I might be starting. Is it okay?
I think you can start. Okay. I will let people in when they come in.
Fantastic.
And, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So hello, everybody. Really happy to host this session today. I'm Adrien Trocmé. I work for R&W Media. It's a Dutch media organization. My current position is partnership lead, and I've been asked to host this session because I have been extremely lucky to work closely with young talents that have set up vibrant digital communities, especially in Africa. And I've been doing this for the last years. And these digital communities today are local media brands. Today, they are highly interested by young people. They are sustainable, and they are a channel of communication and advocacy between young people and authorities. So you might wonder, or maybe most of you know, what does R&W Media stands for? So it stands for Radio Nederland Wereldomroep. That's the Dutch sentence, but in English, we could translate it into Radio Nederlands Worldwide. And actually, when I started working for this organization 8 years ago, my first task, I was asked to look for radio partners because we're still transitioning from international broadcast to a media NGO. And I was asked to find radio partners in Burundi. But what do you do when in one night, all of a sudden, in May 2015, all these media partners, radio media partners, are being shut down? Well, this is exactly what happened in May 2015 in Burundi. So all radio partners were shut down. Officially, you only had 4% of internet penetration. And social media and WhatsApp became the main source of information. Well, this is an example on how digitalization can happen in some countries of Africa. It's not always planned, it's not always guided. There are certain changes, but it can happen due to political events, but also to some change from GAFA. So for instance, when there's a change of algorithm on Facebook, it might push many media to lose their audience, and they need to quickly readapt their format to this algorithm so that they keep informing their audience. So this is all kind of impact of digitalization that we're going to hear today. And I propose you to hear a first story from Dugukolo Bakonare. Is from Mali. And Dugukolo asked me when I proposed him to join this conversation, Adrien, which profile should I bring? Because Dugukolo has a lot of skills. He's a clinical psychologist. At the same time, he has a really strong background in peace building, and especially regarding the protection of civilians in the Sahel. And he has a particular interest into Fulani community. We have been working together with Dugukolo. He was the editor of one of these digital community I was telling you about in Mali. And his talent, his background in psychology has been instrumental because we got so many stories on GBV and in conflicted zones. So he really helped, he was really instrumental to that. So please, Dugukolo, first, I really want to thank you because I believe you're speaking from Washington, so you get up really early. And I've been reading on your LinkedIn that you were also open to network. So that's also an opportunity if you're interested in this profile. Please go ahead, Dugukolo.
Thank you so much for having me today. And I believe that this conversation is going to be really fruitful for all of us. So when asked to talk about digitalization in Africa, in Mali specifically, I could not elude the central question. With the country after a coup d'etat, during the times of rivalry between the West and between Russia, how does it happen in the ground? What happens between different parties and what happens to the population when they're engaging with each other and with the rest of the world online? There are a lot of takeaways. The first thing that I'd like to say is that all things considered, penetration rates are not that low in a country like Mali, at least. A lot of people have access to the internet. And the divide isn't so much between rich and poor than it is about rural areas and urban areas, more often than not. The types of devices and data exchange are indeed a difference between the different classes. And that's an impediment to equality, however. Prices for immediate connection do not seem to be a barrier, in that access is discriminatory. Internet access is so easy and unbridled that it can have pernicious effects, such as hate speech, harassment, and dissemination of fake news. This in turn enables authoritarian regimes to squelch any subjectively judged problematic behavior by ascribing it to as a condemnable character and punishing those responsible. But overall, people still communicate, and because of the communication on platforms like WhatsApp, those can be complementary with social networks. And more often than not, it is there that trends are shaped, and social media acts as the great propagation agent and connection to a broader and more open world, connected with global audiences. To be sure, there aren't only downsides, as solidarity abounds and initiates and enables communities to learn and to get information. And because of that reason, when I was working with human rights and protection of civilians, there's something that I noticed, how people were very, very quickly able to get together, to ask for money, to speak with people from big cities and to advocate for people from villages. And because of that, they were able to send some help really fast, even without the help of the government. So digital media and digital platforms enable citizens to be able to be empowered so that they can complement the role of the government. But then we have to keep in mind that digital media also have been acting as soft power when it comes to shape narratives about various countries. These narratives pervade the public space and they pit sides against each other. Soft power can lead to conflagration of ideas, and the internet becomes a violent battlefield with threats and bludgeoning. And so because of that, it's very difficult to not see effects like censorship. So censorship has been one major component of the digital media in Mali. It's one of the many plights, actually. There are a couple of others, like propaganda, that is designed by the power or different networks connected to it, and that actually feeds into narratives of identity and ultranationalism. And so that makes it difficult to have conversations that are not perceived as betrayal. There's also trolling, which is actually a way of conveying propaganda. And it's something that's ordered and organized by people from the internet, by citizens that sometimes aren't very keen on getting information from the proper sources. There's also the fact of buying from editors and from producers of information so that information and narratives may be geared toward a favorable position vis-a-vis the regime. And this process of buying buying out journalists are something that the local journalistic scene sees as something that has become a habit. So people don't always perceive it as a negative. They just see it as something that's business as usual. There have also been arrests and intimidation by authorities against dissidents. And this is something that, overall shapes the self-censorship. One other thing that you have to keep in mind when talking about self-censorship in such a market where people are so extroverted, where people have such access to information and to tools, is the fact that there is sometimes institutional control. For instance, with the censorship of a media like RFI, from France Média Monde, which is really probably it used to be the radio that was most listened to in Mali by the citizens. And so because the government interfered, now it's not possible to hear RFI in Mali at all. You know, they had shows in French, in Bambara, which is one of the native languages, and in Fulfulde, which is the language of the Fulani, which Adrian mentioned earlier. And then because of that, people have been trying to get access through the internet to the websites of RFI and all these others that may be censored in the current context. And they have not been able to, and they had to rely on VPN, which is something that actually not everyone has access to. So VPN is also one other indicator of class divide in a country like Mali. Then we can also talk about neutralization of expression at a semi-public or even at a private level, with people being reluctant to express exactly the criticism that they feel. And so they have to rely on smaller spaces like WhatsApp groups that are often closed, or WhatsApp that is something sometimes not always available to the larger public, even though, you know, you have some WhatsApp groups numbering some 256 people, you know, the limitation for the platform. One of the things that I would like to touch upon is how, you know, workshops are used as innovative methods for gathering data on ideas about the youth. So with a workshop that are organized by RNW, or with the data that is gathered through Facebook and such, we can get a glimpse still of the main topic that interests the youth. So even if people don't give exactly the opinion that they have, a lot of people actually do. But even when they don't, you know, we can see general trends of what is interesting to them, like gender-based violence, like sexual practices, or like corruption. So we can actually input what we believe to be relevant to them and maybe do some sort of work of pedagogy, for instance. In the context of Mali, it is really hard to really establish, you know, the gender gap. What is for sure is that the rural versus urban gap makes it sure that certain communities are underrepresented. So you see nomadic communities, for instance, even though they may have access to the internet, do not have the same facilities, as the same ease of access as other people from other communities. And women often, more often than not, are the downtrodden in all these communities. They have less economic power. And because of that, of course, they have less access. And I think this is something that the authors will touch upon, even though it will be in other regions of Africa. Colonization has contributed to hawkish positions and reactive positions in the Malian internet. For instance, any idea deemed to be coming from the West is liable to be demonized. It wasn't always this way. And we can wonder to what extent foreign influence ties into this pattern. What is for sure is that there are genuine supporters of more defined ways. A few things that may work locally are barometers, polls, and other objective data measurement tools that can point out how public opinion claims expressions. Then, sharing of results can help feed local discussions about untruths and highlight divides and plurality within societies. The creation of hubs and hotspots may democratize uses of the internet. And then certain topics in a diversity, equity, and inclusion vision are still fraught, such as LGBTQI issues. And so what I would like to say to finish is that I recommend that the Dutch government helps already existing platforms and works with existing media like RNW, France Média Monde, Deutsche Welle to promote free speech, inclusivity, and all of this on a basis of truth seeking, and fact checking. And my main question to finish will be, how can we jointly support a culture of truth and social justice that promotes peace? Thank you very much. I look forward to engaging with the rest of you during the discussion and conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dugukulo, for this extremely dense presentation. And I asked the audience to keep its question, to keep its maybe as observation for later. We'll have a Q&A session after the full presentation. So please write those down, and do not hesitate to ask a bit later to Dugukulo his opinion about it. So we're now going to hear Sandy Abdel Messi. She's from Egypt. She's an expert in digital communication and content creation. She holds a master in gender, sexuality, and culture from Benbere University of London. And Sandy is currently leading the largest digital SRChat platform in the MENA region. MENA means, of course, Middle East, North Africa, Egypt being part of Africa, obviously. So together with her team, she developed content that serves more than 3 million followers on various social media platforms. Please, Sandy, explain how you tackle topics such as sexuality, how you engage in a safe way with women in a country as Egypt.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for the great introduction. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. I'm gonna share my screen first, very quickly. Okay, I'm assuming you can see my screen now. So I'm gonna be speaking about the internet infrastructures in Egypt and how they open opportunities and challenges for young people to express themselves freely online and access correct information. In the beginning, I'd like to jump in some numbers and statistics to give a little bit of context about the internet access in Egypt. So the population, the total population of Egypt today is more than 106 million people. And as you can see, the segregation of age groups, you would see that the largest ratio of the population fall in the age group of 15 to 64 years old, with a median age of 24.6. So it's a largely young population. When it comes to sex ratios, it's an almost 50-50, 50.2% male population and 49.8% female population. And now access to internet, where we have a huge internet penetration in Egypt of 75.66 million people, which is around 71% of the population use the internet, have access to the internet, and 51.45 million, which is almost 50% of the population, are social media users. You can also see that 90.6% of internet users who are in the age group 16 to 64 access the internet using their mobile phones, and out of those, 87.7% are using smartphones. So when it comes to access to internet, speaking of infrastructure and access to mobile phones and devices, there is a good of how much people can access. If we take a look about the increase in internet use since COVID, we can easily see that there has been a spike in the number of internet users in Egypt since 2019 till today. So in 2019, the number of internet users were 46.6 million people, to jump in 2020 to 58 million people, and to 74 million people in 2021. And now around 75% of the population are using the internet, which is, I guess, relevant in most of the contexts as well. Since COVID and the lockdown, many people invested in digitalization, be it in for work purposes or for education purposes or for entertainment purposes. If we take a look very quickly about the daily time spent online in Egypt, where do people spend their time online? So usually around 8 hours of the day are spent generally on the internet, which could range from gaming, social media, news and media, and so on. Around 4 hours from their daily time is spent on TV, and around 3 hours of the daily time is spent on social media. I was very interested to look at the most visited websites by the Egyptian audience. There is always a surprise and some expectations. So it's always expected that Google will be the top one visited website, and then Facebook, and then Bitly, which makes sense because most of the links and hyperlinks are shortened on Bitly, and then a porn website, and then YouTube. So given all those statistics and demographies and the status quo of how much Egypt is connected, what are the opportunities that we can tap into to reach young people with correct information? Given this, there is an increasing reach to young people online and to younger populations as well. Not only the above 18 years old age group. Also, there is a great opportunity since the increase in the short video format of online content. Viral content is now not limited to celebrities or very well established organizations or media productions. Anyone now can have viral content which is not necessarily a big budget production, which is also an opportunity for us projects who are trying to work with young people and reach a massive group of young people online. There is no need anymore for very costly production. A good online content depends mainly on how genuine it is and how relevant it is to young people. Another opportunity which we have been witnessing in the Egyptian context is also the mainstreaming of topics that were hardly discussed before, such as sexual violence and gender equality and the personal status law. And we have seen a spike in discussions around those topics since COVID specifically. Also, an opportunity that we in Love Matters Arabic are using is that young people now can access information about SRHR and engage in discussions around sensitive topics, which is not always, if ever, available in conventional and offline spaces in a safe way. So, speaking of the access to information on SRHR online, this is a very brief look at how Love Matters Arabic experience has been going on over the years using the internet to reach young people. So you can have a look at the numbers of people who visit our pages, the number of followers who follow our content. We receive 18 million website page views per year. We're speaking to around 3 million social media followers in total, and we have the biggest Arabic YouTube channel that produces scientific content on SRHR. Not only that, we also focus on active engagement with our audience, and we do that in so many ways. One of them is to provide online moderation 24/7, which means we have a team of moderators who are experts in SRHR. They come from various backgrounds, medical, psychiatric, gender and sexuality, and we answer around 50 new questions every day across our platform. And some examples of the campaigns that we launched since COVID around topics that we didn't speak about before were cyber harassment, sexual violence, obstetric violence, and unpaid care work. And we could see that obstetric violence and unpaid care work specifically were very new topics to our audience. Mostly people didn't hear of these topics before, and they engaged very positively with those. Sorry, I got confused by the chat. Not only Love Matters Arabic has been experiencing this expansion in the space, in the digital space, where we can speak about topics that were not mainstreamed before. We could also see many initiatives and influencers and activists gaining more followership very quickly since 2020, since COVID, especially those who speak about sex education and women's rights. And I guess this is very obviously related to how people have the means to confine to a safer space to discuss these topics and expose violence, and ideally mobilize allies around topics that are not addressed by civil society or the government. My take on how can we have a better access to the internet in a more safe way is to have access to private internet connections and devices, especially for women in rural areas where they could have access to the internet, but not necessarily through a private connection or a private device, which puts a lot of limits on the type and quality of the content that they can access online. Also lobbying for data protection policies and policies for freedom of speech online. Advocacy for better moderation policies by giant tech companies like Facebook, Meta now, and Twitter, which somehow are complicit with the hate speech comments versus the feminist content that's exposing violence incidents. And lastly, to provide more internet literacy for everyone, including digital security and how to use the internet safely. So if I would put all of that in one sentence as a recommendation, it would be to have constant consultations with digital rights activists and organizations in the region to build those data protection and freedom of speech policies every time we're working on improving the access to internet in Egypt and in Africa. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Sandy. Also looking forward to the questions that people will have for you. I'm asking if Emma is with us because she had an electricity issue. Emma, are you with us? So what I might do, I might ask Jennifer to speak first. So Jennifer, she's representing our partner today from Plan International. Jennifer, I saw you in the chat, so I believe you are here. So Jennifer Delgado, you're from Venezuela. You're a lawyer and international professional. You've been advocating for girls and young women's rights. You have an experience with girl-centered design. You're leading innovation solutions across different geographies for the INGOs. And you've been working for Plan International for at least 5 years. You're currently the global program managers of Girls Out Loud, focusing your work on digital strategies to amplify girls' voices so that they are listened from local, regional, and global perspective. So please, Jennifer, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Adrian, for the quick presentation of myself. Well, today, as Adrian mentioned, I will present what is Girls Out Loud. First, I want to introduce you Plan International. Plan International is an INGO that has presence in more than 70 countries, and we work and we strive for a just world that advances children's rights, and we seek for equality for girls and young women. In this context, as an INGO, 5 years ago, we start asking ourselves, how can we provide girls, how we can create a safe space where girls can discuss key gender issues, learn about their rights, and start their activities so we as an organization can amplify their voices. So we start with this challenge. When we start, we didn't know what kind of solution we will create. We did an ideation session with girls in Colombia. This program, Girls Out Loud, has been co-created with girls since the very beginning. We are a girl-centered design program, and this add value because we are creating for and with our users that are girls and young women. So after the ideation session, we realized that if we wanted to provide girls or to give girls a safe space where they can discuss about the topics that matter to them and we as an organization can listen to them, we should go with digital solutions. When we gave girls a smartphone with internet, the first thing they did was going to Facebook. So we decided to create safe and private Facebook groups. And maybe this sounds like a simple solution, but it's what girls are using. And we didn't want to create another app. We didn't want to create another website that will consume more internet access for girls. And also, we realized that with Facebook, we could have Facebook Live versions that does not consume a lot of space in the smartphone that girls are owning. So we prototyped this Facebook group in Colombia. After a year, we realized that the prototype was successful, and we decided in 2019 to do a first scale-up process to prove and test that the solution is suitable for scaling. And at the moment in 2019, we scaled from Colombia to 5 countries, and this time we include the first West and Central Africa country. It was Senegal. After a year, we realized that, and we start to see that the solution was suitable for different contexts. And during COVID-19, the safe spaces that girls had were reduced even more because they could not go to school that was a safe space for girls, and they could not gather with their friends. So the whole organization, Plan International, saw more clearly and more vividly the importance of having digital programming. So at the moment in 2020, we scaled from 5 to 17 countries. This is where we are right now. And to summarize what Girls Aloud is, Girls Aloud are safe and private social media groups that are being moderated by Plan International. We work with girls from 13 to 26 years old, and in these spaces, girls can discuss the issues they face because of the gender. They can report to the moderators danger situations or difficult situations they are experiencing. And also in this platform, we share with girls information about their rights, their bodies, and about online safety. Girls Out Loud is also a website that we have developed in partnership with IBM. We work with an AI tool that analyzes what girls are saying and feeling from global, regional, and local perspective. We do that because we want girls to be listened, and in this website, you can visualize what girls are saying about different topics, and this can be included in the programming and influencing of different NGOs and different companies as well. We work with Facebook, WhatsApp, and Skype. We support these 3 social networks because it depends on the country and also the internet access girls have in each country. To talk about the regional impact and to talk about our work with Girls Aloud in Africa, I want to mention that in Africa we have 2.5 years active. We have 4,000 and more members, girls. We are working with 7 countries that are active: Benin, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Guinea-Conakry, Guinea-Bissau, and Sierra Leone. And right now we are scaling to the Central Sahel region as part of the response of the organization. So we are going to have Mali and Niger in the following weeks. We have around 12,000 monthly interactions, and this means posts, messenger conversations, reactions to the posts, and comments on the Facebook groups. As I mentioned, this is a group where girls can discuss about key gender issues, but they can also discuss about what topics matter the most to them. We have evidence that from region to region, there are similitudes on what girls are talking about, but especially in Africa, mostly in all of the countries, this is the list of topics girls are talking about. The leadership and empowerment of girls in Africa, girls and women's rights, activists, and how they can start activists in their communities, in their schools. Also, they are really interested in learning about access and safety online, gender-based violence, and in here I have to say that girls in West and Central Africa countries are experiencing more gender-based violence than in other regions, and we can evidence that because the reports that we are receiving in Africa countries are bigger and are more. Also about early pregnancies, child marriage, sexual and reproductive health, and education. Through the platform and through the conversations we have been having for the last 2.5 years with girls in West and Central countries, we have evidence, and this is what they are saying, that the biggest challenge for them to be free and safe online are the first, access to devices. Girls lack the access to smartphones, to tablets, to computers. Girls are the last one in the house to have or to own a cell phone. And when they own a cell phone or a smartphone, it's an old smartphone that is maybe from the dad, from the brother, that gives that to the girl. Access to internet in some countries like Sierra Leone, for example, access to internet is really expensive and it's really difficult for girls to access. That is why in Sierra Leone we are working with WhatsApp, which requires less internet. And the third challenge girls are facing is be safe online. They need to receive accurate information about how they can be safe online, how they can report harassment or bullying online. So we are really working on that with girls from the program and also from Plan International. We are providing monthly top-ups to girls to all countries so they can receive an incentive to be connected. And in some countries like in Senegal, they are providing every month some smartphones to girls so they can be connected as well and they can share the smartphone with their friends. And every month we are providing online safety trainings, and also we are doing face-to-face meetups, so offline activities to support this virtual community that we have built, so we can also discuss with girls face-to-face what are the risks to be online and how they can be safe. What is our ask? The future looks more and more digital. The jobs of the future are digital jobs, and if girls and young women are not included, we are going to perpetuate the gender inequality. The gender gap will be perpetuated, so girls and young women need and should be digital empowered so they can access, use, and create technology. Thank you so much, and I will be waiting for your questions, and happy to be here with you today.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Fantastic program you are leading, Girls Out Loud from Plan International. So looking forward to the session next. But before that, let's finish with Emma Orori Ayombambemi. Emma, you are with us now. I saw in the chat. So you are the Digital Strategy and Engagement Manager of the organization Media, Health and Rights Initiative. This organization hosts the platform Love Matters Naija. Before we heard Sandy from Love Matters Arabic, and now we are in Nigeria with Emma Olori. So Emma, you started your career in the execution of strategic projects in finance and technology. So I heard a lot of use of cryptocurrency in Nigeria. So maybe you might receive some questions about this later on. But you kind of dropped this aspect and you transition towards human rights advocacy. And you are working on the social change through sustainable strategies in human development approaches. And what you've been doing a lot, it's including expanding context in engagement. So you said in your bio that you spend 5,000 hours engaging with your community. That's quite impressive. And you brought support, psychosocial support through 1,300 sessions. So that's quite impressive indicators and a really strong M&E system. So what you want to focus on now, it's how to make possible inclusive representation of underserved and excluded groups within the gender development and SRHR scene through digital media. Please, Emma, go ahead.
She's in the process of joining again.
Okay.
So, sorry, guys.
Digital will allow. Okay, because I saw she was in the chat.
She was just in, but then she was kicked out again. I'm not sure, but it's taking a long time for her to join.
Okay.
And well, she just went out again. I'll keep you updated when she gets in, but yeah, sorry guys.
No, sure. So this is one of the challenges we are often facing working with local partners and obviously for the internet users in the different countries of Africa. So electricity cuts, electricity shortage, data issues. Yeah, this is real life problems. So meanwhile, maybe I might take one question to make sure we don't lose too much time. Will there be one question from the audience? And we might then interrupt this while Emma will join us. But is there somebody who would like to ask a question to our panelists today? How do you deal? Okay, so that's how do you deal with deep fakes? A question from Walter from SNV. So is there anybody who wants to take that one, deep fakes?
Sure, I can answer that question. Well, the obvious one will be saying you don't, but I guess it's a bit more complicated than that. As a researcher myself, I am confronted along with journalists with widespread disinformation. So when you get a picture that is doctored to look like someone else is saying something, like what happened with the French leaving Mali, there have been allegations that the French have been pilfering Mali, that they've been equipping the jihadists in Mali. So I guess deepfakes are just one part of disinformation. We aren't that well versed into the deepfakes in Mali yet, or in the Sahelian region, but what we can see is other forms of manipulation. And when facing that, the only thing you can do is debunk what is happening. So some media already are doing that. They're going through the process, mainly foreign media. Local media are having a harder time doing it. I think that interest from researchers and interest from countries abroad is what is driving the investigation around deepfakes. But for now, it really is one of the plights that we're sort of looking forward to tackling in the future.
Thanks so much, Dukolo, for this answer. Meanwhile, Emma is back. Emma, can you hear us? If you can unmute yourself. Yeah. Please go ahead, Emma. Okay. So I see that Emma is in the chat. All right, so that's really unfortunate. issue with internet. Okay, so let's take then another question. Is there another question from
Adrian, sorry to interrupt. I see
yes.
a raised hand. So maybe we can invite them to talk. I don't see it anymore, but there was a raised hand.
Yes, that was me.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Sonny from Nigeria. I'm hoping that Emma joins, but before then, my question goes to for the presentation from Egypt. I saw the part where you talked about the challenges. You mentioned the cyber protection laws in the country and the clause which seeks to protect the culture in Egypt and to prohibit contents that seem to go against all of that. So I wanted to know what was the reaction of civil society and young people, considering the large number of your youthful population. What was the reaction to the introduction of these prohibitions in your country?
Thank you so much for your question. Actually, there was a polarization when it comes to the reaction of people around this, the whole anti-cybercrime law, and also the specific clauses around Egyptian family values and that. Because there is a context as well, a political context that justifies more severe in the name of fighting terrorism and extremist groups. So you have to have more power and control going into the infrastructure to make sure that you're keeping everything under control and you're keeping the national security in place. So this is always an introduction that makes any project with some problematic components pass largely without much debate. However, there were a lot of debates online from civil society and from young people, especially around the Egyptian family values clause, because it's just mundane. It doesn't have any meaning. It's vague. And we've seen it being placed in targeting women digital content creators specifically, and it has been fueled by male content creators online and supported by male lawyers who would voluntarily go and file lawsuits against the women. And the context is we're trying to make sure that our society is still we're maintaining our culture and we're maintaining our values and we're fighting the extreme or the unmoral behaviors of younger generations, and especially women, because we've never seen this happening to any male content creators. Although there is like a huge amount of content online from male content creators, which is basically hate speech and misogyny and sexual harassment and so on. So yeah, there was this polarization between groups who see like, yes, this is very needed. We want to protect our children and our adolescents from the waves of, unmoral attitudes and behaviors that are being mainstreamed online. And another group of activists and civil society organizations and also young people who are just using the internet were against this. But so far, no concrete changes or appeals have been put in place in a formal way to maybe suggest some amendments to this clause in the law.
Thanks so much, Sandy, for this answer. We're going to give another try with Emma.
I'm here, Adrian.
Fantastic, Emma. Okay, was worth trying. Please go ahead, Emma, and show your presentation, and we're listening to you.
Fantastic, thanks. Hello, everyone, and good morning. I'm unable to start my video for some reason I don't understand, but I'll go ahead to share my screen anyway. Does the host need to give me permission to do this? Right.
Oh, you should be able to share.
I can. I will share.
Adrian, do you mind? Because
yeah, I will share it. No worries.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Of course. And please go ahead.
Great. Once again, it's wonderful to be here. I'm speaking particularly to gender inclusivity in online communities in which we enable women to engage and participate. As the slide presents, regarding particularly communities and exclusivity, we are familiar with the fact that the brain receives millions of bits of information in a second, but the brain can only consciously process about 60 bits per second, according to research data analysis from MIT. So in thousands of facets of an individual, another person can make immediate or snap judgments about person A because the brain creates shortcuts on whatever is first perceived in order to decide who or what a person is. This is also referring to the fact that these judgments can be based on learned experiences and stereotypes that exist below the conscious awareness of an individual. There are many communities, and communities around the world have become social hubs with a personality of their own. And this gives you some insight into what currently is the trend around the globe. A glimpse of that is the potential of what social media platforms can do and the communities in those social media platforms. According to the Digital 2022 Global Overview Report, the findings provide that 13.5 new users join social media every single second. So if you're ticking away, by the end of the day, in a total 24 hours, we would have had 1,066,440 new social media users at the end of each day. Globally, the time spent on social media apps, just the general upkeep of community relationships, the content, the facilitation of engagement, evaluation that happens, and reporting are moving at lightning speed. It's amazing, and it makes it even harder to catch this unconscious bias that we have referred to. So let me bring you back to where we are with Media Health and Rights Initiative hosting Love Matters Naija in Nigeria. We have 950,000 active users on our Facebook platform, focused on learning evidence-based sexual health education and rights. However, each member also have their multiple other identities, including gender, race, nationality, sexual orientation, religion, social class, and ability. Now, these identities impact how they participate in the learning process. Therefore, building inclusive digital spaces is crucial because this is what removes barriers to social change. Now, in creating and promoting inclusive communities, we generally look at it as a bunch of, oh, there are community rules and there are guidelines and that's it. But really, that's not it, because the question is, what use is the wall without the watcher on the wall? Who's really watching to make sure that there's inclusivity? How are exclusionary comments, posts, and attitudes handled beyond a diversity statement that any organization has? We start with building intentional digital environments that enable this diversity, where people, especially women, can come together to address their most extreme needs. In Africa, a great number of the population have a phone. I mean, anyone can have a phone, but not necessarily a smartphone, which makes internet connectivity very smart. But during and after the COVID-19, the role of connected devices moved from a luxury to a lifeline. It was no longer, oh, I have a phone, it's fancy and it's really smart, but a phone that can save lives. For essential services to stay available to the population, convenience had to be redefined for feature phones so that interventions considered affordability and accessibility beyond anything else. We asked ourselves, how do we ensure that people have access to the help that they need without breaking their economic power or having to walk many miles to the next health care center? In a digital environment for smartphones and in the thick of the lockdowns, we focused on a program that met women's issues regarding access to SRH services. We amplified the visibility of ordering contraceptives online through a prominent retail shopping outlet that delivered to their doorsteps. At the same time, a piece of content about menstruation and ovulation sparked community conversation where there were more men dominating the narrative, including those who were very verbally indicating that they counted their partner's menstrual cycle. They could tell when she was ovulating and they could tell when it was time for her to have a period, solely removing the choice of contraception. It was imperative at that time to then give young women and girls the right to speak and take a seat at the head of this table. But dealing with the cultural challenge of inherited shame of menstruation as a taboo topic, we engineered private sessions for Q&As for clarification, then referrals to care. So feature phone owners also received equal attention through the harvesting of mobile numbers and the use of a text to USSD for question and answers, with referrals to reproductive healthcare partners on a toll-free line. The direct connection was to a call center where the ratio of doctors to patients is balanced. And that innovation unblocked problems with bodily autonomy and access to basic diagnosis. Women should have the same access to phones and the systems on phones so they are not left behind in the access to equitable health. Another thing that's important for inclusive digital spaces is content moderation that ensures the platform is safe for everyone. Content detection tools are great, but are only as intelligent as the artificial intelligence behind them. As the context wars for AI continue, human moderators must then watch and protect users without discrimination against the same users who are on the platform. So using a derogatory name or a slang might be something to consider and watch out for carefully in different contexts compared to when a friend may use that word and it will be okay. So language is a key structure to ensuring cultural inclusivity. Think about this, that 60% of all web content is in English, 60%. But there are only 16% of the world population that speak English. So this seeps into pop culture, and it also influences and shapes the adaptation of the words used in English language. There are patriarchal and age cultural myths that still shape the language of men and boys to shame women and girls into conforming to practice that limits their sexual rights and freedom. And we find that the most relatable advocacy messages are those localized and devoid of sexism. To take cultural exclusive language out, we must also steer creators towards gender-neutral terms that respect the self-expression of people who identify as LGBTQIA, and of course, female empowering language that respects their gender and self-expression. Finally, we like to ensure that we clarify the experience needed for gender roles in digital communities. Because the society is male appeasing, men are continually promoted based on potential, while their female counterparts are stuck on a treadmill and have to prove themselves by outperforming the male. Women are judged differently, even by fellow women. And there will be no getting off that treadmill until we break barriers. Cultural barriers, including shifting perceptions about how women are rising to the challenge, must then be amplified. We saw an example of this in the lockdowns, where the resilience of women, projected in the rural communities where they were at the forefront of healthcare. They went from door to door distributing supplies. They provided news updates. They saved lives while uplifting their children and families. So we know that when women are in the decision-making on issues that concern them, they innovate and present data-backed solutions that break down the barriers to advancement, especially in the current process of economic recovery. And where the onus therefore lies on us is to educate women on media literacy so they can take advantage of social tools for that purpose. I will go ahead to present to you a survey data that we conducted recently on the Love Matters Naija platform. We used that to determine and assess the level of equity and access to inclusive digital spaces. This is the data that we gathered. First, you see here from the sample size collection, we wanted to determine the number of male to female, and we had about 61.6% of the sample size were female and 37.7% male. And we wanted to know how many of these groups of people purchase data. This is access to the internet now. Do you purchase for your loved one, for your boyfriend, for your girlfriend? And we see the larger number of 38.4% saying not at all, but the 37.7 male who responded in the initial question purchased data for their significant other at least once a month. But we have the female group who responded and indicating more than once a month, twice a month, and sometimes more than 2 times a month for their significant other. We found this very interesting. And when we moved on to the next question, the total, could you shift down, please, Adrian? The next slide, please. Great. We then wanted to know how much data does one person, does an individual use in a week? And we see the figures here, about 37.7%. While 80.1% of the sample size attest to their standard data bundle costs more than it did during COVID-19, those who use less than 5 gig are the larger number. This is just an infinitesimal number of people who are able to access the internet because they don't have sufficient data to do that. And those who are able to afford 15 gig of data a week are very inconsequential. It's such a few number. Can you just move to the next slide, please, Adrian? So Facebook's innovative approach has been very helpful in the fact that the feature of a free mode on Facebook allows for users to be able to connect to the platform without an existing data plan. As long as they have a working internet connection, So it's no surprise here that we see in this question that 61.6% of the sample size utilize Facebook more, followed by WhatsApp, and then other calls-ware for professional development at 8.2%. Now, what this data shows is people are coming more online to Facebook to get information, to interact, participate, but they're also spending time developing skills outside of their social networks, joining professional courses and getting certified. The next slide, please, Adrian. Thank you. So we decided to dig deeper into all of these apps that are used. 32.9% of users mostly promote their businesses. That's what they come on Facebook to do. So I come on Facebook to promote my small business and my brand. Others come to read or watch topical news and learn about new ways to make money. Those are the higher numbers. 39.2, 17.1, and 13. The other number of 11% are those who are engaging with social communities on issues about sexual and reproductive health. From this sample size and all of the data that we have collected, we can clearly see that the data indicates economic recovery and financial independence are paramount in the will of users in digital communities, even as the larger number struggle with the most daunting challenge of never having enough data to engage with peers on topics that matter to them. That's the last slide. Finally, I'd just like to say that drawing from all of this data, awareness, safety, and empowerment are very important. All of these key points highlighted ring the bells for us to ensure that we are providing awareness to digital communities, we are ensuring that it's safe, and we empower women. Without understanding different populations, which this survey sought out to do, and the needs of these populations, platforms cannot make a change. So using the knowledge that we have, we can then create safety so that an environment of inclusivity can begin to develop. User choice, self-representation, and access to diverse content empower users, especially women, to interact on the platform authentically and freely, which ultimately builds dynamic social environments where they can thrive. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Emma. We have a direct question for you. Your survey and the figures you introduced were really interesting for the audience. How many people participated in the survey and in which country?
Okay, this survey was in Nigeria, and as we said, we took a sample size of 146 people on the active digital platforms that we use.
Right. Thanks so much. And I was going to ask the audience, do you know in the room, in the virtual room, how many gigas do you spend per week? This is a question I never wonder, I never ask myself. And the fact that in Nigeria, because you pay per giga, you have this question, it shows how different is the use of internet in a country like Nigeria. Do we have any other questions from the room? We still have 20 minutes ahead of us. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead, Frederick.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thanks for the different presentations. I have a question for the speaker from Mali. Mali is like considered as one of the Sahel country or West Africa, and we know that the Sahel countries in some ways share some cultural values and have similar things together. So my question is, does it think the case of Mali could be the same in other Sahel countries concerning digitalization? And also, what does it think is the difference between any Sahel country, I mean West Africa Sahel country, which he knows in terms of digitalization, what's the difference between that specific country with the context of Mali?
Thank you very much for the question. One of the main features of Mali is that the penetration rate is about 30%. So that is higher than that of Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, and Mauritania as well. So among these countries of the G5 Sahel, Mali is probably the one that is best placed in terms of access to the internet. But one of the main problems you have to keep in mind is that literacy is pretty low in all of these Sahelian countries. So that means that actually a lot of people connect to the internet without having knowledge of reading, so they can do the basic things. And that is a feature that is definitely common in all of these places. One of the main differences I will say is that the scene in terms of media is much more vibrant in Mali as well than in others. So you have access to so many TV channels, radio channels that you wouldn't have in other countries like Chad. It is true that now Mali is sort of receding in terms of democracy, in terms of access to media. So that means that, you know, the platform that already exists are practicing self-censorship. But at first, initially, they had developed. So that means that there is still some ground for them to be ahead of other countries in the region. One thing that I'd like to say that these countries have in common is also the fact that they are a part of the same development plans with the African Development Bank, with the French Development Agency, USAID, etc., etc. So they often benefit from the same funds. But I will say I'm sort of preaching to the choir here. RNW is in Mali, so we are very lucky to have Benbere, Benbere.org, with which I was an editor. So Benbere really produces content that opens up conversations and discussions with the public at large. And that also enables people to get some traction on sexuality, on democracy, on gender-based violence, etc., etc. So you have that much interest in Mali that probably exists for other countries, but there really haven't been experiments that have been successful in these other countries.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Frédéric and Google, for this conversation. Any other question or recommendation you also want to share? And meanwhile, I will share the recommendation that have been already expressed by the audience. Please go ahead, the audience. All right. Yeah, so we share the recommendation that we have had so far. I saw Odette that you, Odette from PSI Europe, you shared a comment. Would you like to give a further observation? I'm sorry to pointing you on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was only able to join late, but I was just impressed by the insights, the details of the numbers. So I wanted to thank you for those, for sharing those.
Thanks so much, Odette. Any other person? Okay, I see a comment in the chat from Walter. Thanks for that.
Yes, perhaps I can elaborate a bit more. Yeah, thanks for the interesting presentations on digital inclusion. I would like to point out, also from a point of view from SNV, that there's also, since this is also a broader consultation on the Africa strategy on digitalization, that there's also opportunities for digital innovation in the agricultural sector, in energy, and in water. You see a lot of digital apps being developed to make agriculture more productive. In energy, you see the emergence of digital tools, and in water, you see the role of digital tools in supporting equitable water resource management. And also to mention last that digital tools can contribute to youth employment, especially the tech-savvy youth in Africa. They can use their digital skills to progress impact in these three sectors. So I just wanted to point to that.
Thanks so much, Walter. I can only agree with you. And we were discussing earlier about sometimes population, which is illiterate. We cannot write or read, but it doesn't prevent some population to use WhatsApp or Facebook. And just give you an example about agriculture. I heard some stories about a shepherd which is going to sell his sheep through WhatsApp by just taking a picture, and the client in Bamako, the shepherd is maybe is in Ségou or Mopti, and the client in Bamako can pick the sheep he wants through the pictures. So that's also a way to do business through WhatsApp, and you do not necessarily need to be writing or reading a language. So that's one example. I would also maybe ask a question to the audience. Do you think the big tech, we have heard a lot about Facebook platforms, moderation, inclusivity, and we've seen all the efforts that are being made by our panelists today. Authentic, genuine moderation won't happen. You need people working on that, people who are skilled, who have sociological background and can support the audience. So do you think, it's a question maybe for the panelists and then the audience can answer, big tech do enough to moderate the spaces where you guys are active? I don't know who wants to take that question.
Please, can you bring the question again? I missed some parts.
So do you think companies such as Meta, Facebook do enough to moderate the spaces, to moderate the conversation? And I ask this question because the Facebook leaks, the Facebook files with the whistleblower Francis Hogan showed that only 776 people were hired to moderate the audience of 220 million Arabic speakers. So my question is a bit rhetoric, but yeah, what do you think the role should be of tech companies such as Facebook?
I can answer that question in part. With my background in human rights protection, we have been faced with so much hate speech and threats, specifically with the context of Fulani population. I remember these people in Burkina Faso saying, well, we have to put you guys in ovens, we have to exterminate you guys, etc., etc. So nothing was really done by Facebook at the time. We had to signal, and sometimes, it was written in local languages, so they were really clueless as to what to do. But the governments did sometimes observe what was happening. So we had to take screenshots, and we had to go into people's profiles and sort of document what was happening, and then convey the data to government officials. And then sometimes, only a few times actually, they were actionable behind the scenes and they were able to do arrests. But other than that, I feel like it's really lacking in terms of protection. And I can only imagine how that may impact and self-censor women and other minorities. When I say minority, I mean in terms of access to political and social and economic power, of course.
I'd also like to take a go at that, Adrian. I think it's important to note that for moderation, particularly for Meta, just like you mentioned, yes, it is true, there are few and far between. And before
Emma, we cannot hear you. Am I the only one? Emma, we cannot hear you. We lost you. Okay, that's really unfortunate. Okay, so there was this a question about which language is used to communicate with the audiences. And I see a comment from Alu that content creation is done in English, but many inflections of local dialects, especially Pidgin, which is grammatically simplified form of language, typically English. Maybe the other panelists want to answer to this question, which language it is used. I know that in Burundi, there is a huge difference if you publish a post in French or in Kirundi, and it's much higher in Kirundi. So obviously, the more local the language and the content is, the better engagement we have. Is there any one of the panelists who wants to take this question? Which language is being used?
I would like to go ahead. And well, in Girls Promote platforms, we are speaking the national language, but also moderators should speak local languages. For example, in Senegal, girls are more keen to speak when the language used is the local language. And the names of the groups are also being created with the girls, but in local languages. For example, in Burkina Faso, the name of the group is Yadpubnet Burkina, which means girls voices, and this is in the local languages. We encourage moderators to create content in the language that girls feel more free and confident to talk about.
Thanks, Jennifer. And this is
I may have something to
yeah,
add.
please.
You know, more often than not, when we talk about our countries, we tend to select one language, you know, as the majority language, like Wolof in Senegal, Bambara in Mali, More in Burkina Faso. And that creates another phenomenon where some ethnic minorities may feel like they're being put aside. And sometimes, you know, that ties into national dynamics where they already feel that they're excluded. So it sort of deepens the divide, the gap between the peoples in the country. And like I mentioned before, you know, you have a gap between rural areas and urban areas. So that's also something to keep in mind, definitely. Not all languages seem to be equal on the internet, even, you know, when you put aside colonial, quote unquote, colonial languages.
Thanks so much, Bukulo.
May I add
yes?
addition to this? Yeah. When it comes to language, I guess we've been struggling a little bit with an internal conversation about the use of English in our content, because we produce all our content in Arabic language, which is basically the edge of why Love Matters Arabic since its birth has been unique, because it's English content is always available online and easier to find. But there was a big challenge to find accurate and reliable Arabic content. But now we see also a divide in class where young people who come from upper classes usually use English to communicate and create content and access information, which puts us in a puzzle. Should we create also content to reach these groups, or should we stick to trying to decolonize this section of information and to normalize speaking about sexuality in Arabic, because this is also one of our objectives, is to not to hide in a foreign language to speak about things that might bring discomfort, but at the same time there is a group that it's harder to access because of the language barrier, although they are Egyptians living in Egypt. So this is actually an interesting observation that we've been discussing, and I felt like I wanted to share this with a bigger group. Maybe someone has an experience how to deal with this.
Thanks a lot, Sandy. And I think we can take the language question in this broad sense. It's language, but it's also the tone of voice. If you want to address young people, you should be using, you should showcase young people talking to young people. And if you want to address rural population, you should also, it should be a rural population speaking to rural population to make sure you can gain some trust from the audience, because the audience is really selective as they have so much choice. Is there a last question? Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I wanted to share a point on this, the language issue. what I also noticed, I mean, because we are working in communications, like providing communication services to mainly non-profits, they tend to communicate more in Western languages like French or English, because in some ways, finally, the final content they produce is like not intended to the local communities. It is more intended to donors, to international partners. So most of the time they produce very few contents in local languages, and almost all of the content are produced in English, or mainly in English or in French, because they should use the content to document what they are doing, share with donors, and get more support. So this also plays on the use of the language in their work.
Well, thanks so much, Frederick. This is a really important point you're mentioning. Indeed, we tend to mix corporate communication and communication to the communities we want to reach. And it's true that most of the time, the language, the tone of voice chosen is not the one which is going to engage the audience, because they will never feel this message is for them. And I believe and I hope that Untitled Media has been really developing this expertise to make sure that local young person are going to express and communicate towards local young person. We reach 11:30, so it's going to be the end of the session unless there's a really urgent point to be mentioned. I don't see any more questions, but Unas said that if you have any further question, any further observation, you have an email address. I really want to thank you, the panelists, for being present today. I also want to thank our partner from Plan, Jennifer, Plan International. Okay, I see a comment from Dino. Translated and delivered content time different content the local languages. Okay, Dino. So maybe you can send us your observation, and I want also, of course, to thank Partos for letting us, giving us this space to discuss about digitalization. Thanks so much, and have a good day.
Bye.